everybody. Thank you for joining us. Let us know if you can hear us and see us. Hi, Simon. Anybody saying yes? We can hear you because that would be highly appreciated. Yeah? No? Okay, I would say to myself, yes, we can hear you. Seriously. Okay.
I think no
Okay.
news is good news.
No news is good news. Yes, okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So you were right. No news is good news. So let's start. How it will be organized this webinar. It will be a bit different than normally. Normally, it will be like the person doing the presentation. This time, we can have questions. So we have a set of questions already ready, but do not hesitate. I made it. You made the question? Oh, you made it to the webinar. Okay. Anyway, we have a set of questions. Then are already ready. But like if those are not aligned with the question, oof, those are not aligned to the question you normally you have. Do not hesitate to ask other questions. Okay. But first of all, the big moment. I know that you are all here for this, and it is the presentation of the association. Because, yes, we are here also for that. So let me present SEO Nord Switzerland. I will share the screen. So, first of all, let me share the screen. Okay, today I just have one screen, so I hope that you can see everything. And let's go here. So, okay, so as you know, it is SEO Nord Switzerland, which is an association that was organized by Isaline and myself. The main goal it was to share knowledge and to be all together and enjoy all together. And then COVID happened, and then we went online and physical. So we have both events. We come from Switzerland, so we have event in Switzerland physically and online as today. What you have to know, it's an association, but it's also a community. So it's like open to everybody. We share a lot of information inside the community thanks to the speakers, and they come and like Jarno then give their time, and we really hope then you can learn something today. We hope also then that will help you in your career, obviously, because like this is a fantastic topic that we have today. So let's go for that. We promote obviously also women as a public speakers, and what we do is then when people want to become public speaker, we try to support them, especially minority. We try to support them by giving the time and getting comfortable in speaking publicly, and then they do a presentation to SEO Nerd, and then they can go all over they want. So this is a bit about us. An important thing is like sharing is caring. So if you could share, for example, at the end, how fantastic Jarno was because he's giving his time. And this is my mom. Okay, forgot to close that. So it's giving his time, and it's like, and the association and myself too, we are giving the time. So it would be nice if you could share. We have sponsors. Thank you so much to Leap. Then it was the previous company that I was working for. Now I work for Blue Glass, which is a digital agency in Zurich, and work in SEO, which are our two sponsors. Next speaker will be Nick, and also Nick, like somebody in the public, will wake up in the middle of the night because she's in Australia. And she will speak at SEO Nerd, and she will speak about click-through rate optimization and forecasting, which is something that I particularly excited about because she will give us some models. So that's everything about SEO Nerd. And now our next speaker, which obviously you're here for him, then is Jarno, which will speak about product variant schema markup. So what I can say about Jarno. So I would like just to do a small introduction because we don't have the slides. So I think that I met Jarno. I knew you by name because like in the SEO community, I think that there are very few people that are specialized as you are in everything that is schema markup. So it was like the thing, no? Like I have a schema markup problem. Call Jarno. Normally something like this happens. So it's like you are obviously very well known for that. And then I think that I met you because I had a schema markup problem, and
Yeah,
Jason was in contact with you to solve that problem. So so I'm really excited about this topic. And I don't know, would you like to introduce yourself?
sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to participate. You're pretty right. I think we first finally had contact about some issue you had for some site a while back already. And generally speaking, I do that all over the place. I'm part of several Slack community groups. I answer people online on Twitter, on LinkedIn. I sort of do that everywhere. Um, Long time SEO. I've built my first website in 1998, and ever since I've been involved with the web. First off, as a web designer, that became front end engineer, that became accessibility engineer. And then I ran into structured data around 2008. So 3 years before schema.org started. And I was already playing around with structured data, trying to figure out what was it about actually. Think about 6 months before schema.org was released, I ran into some W3C listing postings that mentioned a website I was working on. And so I got in touch with those people, discovered schema.org, and I think I started lurking around in that community about 6 months before schema.org was announced. And by the time schema.org was launched, within the first year, I was the #2 publisher of structured data markup globally. So yeah, I've been around for a while in this field.
Clearly for a while, and clearly you were already foreseeing the opportunity with schema markup when everybody still were not very sure about schema markup. So now
Now
we
my
are all like,
curiosity came. Oh, sorry.
no, girls, now we are all like, oh,
No.
schema markup, we need it. Before it was
My
not.
curiosity was mostly triggered because of the fact I was doing a lot of with accessibility and writing for accessibility, which has a lot to do with semantics, just not the
Uh,
semantics particularly we use for structured data markup. But because I wasn't involved in the world of semantics, so to say, when I discovered semantic annotations, that really triggered my interest and was like, ooh, I can specify even more meaning. That sounds like a good idea. So I didn't come from a developer background. It was mostly because of my accessibility background.
uh-huh. That is something. We discovered something about you. Okay, so let's start with the questions because I think this is
Sure.
the main reason why everybody is here is the questions. So we have a set of questions. Again, I repeat it. Do not hesitate to write in the chat. Well, okay, the most basic question, but I feel then is like also important, especially because this one will be recorded, is what is product variant schema markup? I mean, give us a quick explanation, just 2 seconds, just because there is the recording, and I really feel that it's important to have a small introduction.
Well, from the first day search was invented, um, there has never been any support for product variants. A good example for that would be a pair of Adidas sneakers. You don't have a certain model of sneakers just in one flavor. You have them in different colors, you have them in different sizes, you have them with different patterns. And until recently, the only way we could get those products in Google's organic search results was by opening up all those different URLs, all those different product variants, and say to Google, here you got everything, figure it out. And Google had no idea what the relationship was between all those different products, had no idea what a variant was and what wasn't. Over at the Merchant Center side of things, that has been clear for years already. If you create a Merchant Center feed, you can create item groups, and those item groups represent a group of products that vary according to certain properties. But there was no telling that same type of information to the search engine. Biggest issue with that was, especially with a pair of sneakers where you easily have 30 or 40 different types of variants or even more, is that you had dozens and dozens of URLs you needed to get indexed. But those URLs were crawled very sparsely. I've seen it happen in the past where a product went out of stock. Week later, it was in stock again, yet the search result persisted in showing that product was out of stock for more than a year. And that has to do with crawl optimization and the fact that crawling all those products on e-commerce sites costs an enormous amount of effort on the side of the search engines. With the new product variant markup, we now have a possibility on a single page to describe the whole series of products. That means that the search engines, generally speaking, for every product that's part of a product group, they only need to surface one of those products and they get the information for the entire series. So that's a huge crawl optimization for the search engines. Doesn't mean they don't crawl those other pages, yes, but they don't have to modify the crawl rate of those pages. If there is anything updated in a series of products that part of a product group, then you only need to crawl one and you got the information of the entire series. And that's the huge win for the search engines in that regard.
So I think then your introduction was so detailed, you already answered probably 5 questions in that. So it's fantastic.
Oh, this is
So
just a start.
but this is just the start, but it's perfect. So another question: how does product variant schema markup differ for single page vs multiple page product variation? I don't know if this is clear for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you want to clarify the question. I let you clarify the question maybe to make sure that everybody gets the difference
Well,
between.
if you look at Google's product variant markup documentation, they clearly specify two types of markup. One is for the situation where you have a so-called single page markup situation, and you have the multi-page version of that markup. The biggest difference between those two is that for the single page version, you have one canonical URL of all the products that are part of a product group. So if you take a pair of Adidas sneakers, you can actually make a common page that says Adidas sneakers of a certain model. And people will land on that page because that's the canonical URL of all those variants. But because the search engine has the information of the URLs of all those different variants, they can pick that up on the canonical URL. And so on the canonical URL, you only have to add the markup on that page. You don't have to add the markup on all the different variant pages because all those variant pages have been canonicalized. In the multi-page version, there is no canonical URL. So you actually give Google access to all your product variants and you expect them to crawl all of them. This has the downside of if Google needs to crawl everything, how the heck are they going to keep things updated correctly? And that's why on multi-page variants, you have to add the markup to each page. To each product variant page, you have to include the whole series of markup because else Google still needs to crawl everything. So that's the main difference between how the two work. The single page variant is for when you have product variants that have a canonical to a single page, and the multi-page variant doesn't have canonicalized URLs. Furthermore, the single page markup does require you to have resolvable URLs for all those variants. That's because Google doesn't want people to land on a page where they still have to click on all kinds of buttons to set the correct size and the correct color. They want people to be able to land on the targeted page they showed in their search results. So that's why they do not support markup for pages that don't have separate URLs for all those variants. Both the single page variant markup, the single page condition and the multi-page condition require you to have URLs for all your variants. The biggest difference is that one set is canonicalized and the other variance is not canonicalized. I hope that was
Okay.
clear.
Yeah, it was clear. That brings me to other question, but I would say then it's not my time for the question, it's the time for other question. Often in e-commerce, variants are defined through, okay, but this brings me quite a bit to my question. We were speaking about like how it should be implemented, and so in the reality, you already answer because often like you have um, so we skip this question because anyway you already answer. Okay, this is interesting. What are some common mistakes to avoid when implemented product schema variant markup? Did you face some problem? Then you were like, okay, this everybody will have it.
I think at this moment it's too early to tell what will be the common mistakes because this markup has only been launched recently and it requires quite a lot of technical investment to be able to pull it off. So I think it's too early to tell what will be the common mistakes. When you're talking about common mistakes, it's pretty similar to what I expect I see a lot of people do on their websites, and that's going overboard with their schema markup as a whole. There's a big difference between everything you can find on schema.org and the things you can find in Google's documentation. Even though a lot of people are starting to go beyond Google's documentation, people are focusing too much on all the other stuff schema.org offers. If you're not very experienced in schema markup, chances are high that if you try to implement everything you use on schema, you find on schema.org, that you're only going to end up making mistakes. So in general, the most common mistake is people going overboard and doing too much. In my opinion, people should focus more on what they're doing based on Google's own documentation. And once you've got that perfectly in place, or maybe then you can have a look at schema.org to see how you can expand on that. But in general, I see things break because people go too far without proper understanding of what they're doing.
Okay,
The biggest tip, simply keep it at Google's documentation if you're not really familiar with schema.org.
Okay, that looks like a good tip. Okay. So you show me an implementation that you recently did, and then it was all green. So congratulations. So in this implementation, you were saying it's very technical. Which difficulty did you face when implementing schema markup in this kind of schema markup?
I've been involved in the process of coming up with the vocabulary for product variants for more than a decade already over at schema.org. Because it's not only been discussed over at schema.org, we've also been discussing it on several channels in the years before the GitHub account existed from schema.org. It's product variants has been a returning issue for more than a decade already. So because I've been involved in that project for so long, I had a few clients that were part of the process of us developing that vocabulary. I was already implementing things we were discussing over at schema.org so that we could try to discover what's the practical issue behind this. Does this really work for publishers? And one of the things we had a lot of difficulty with, and I expect a lot of people which Shopify and WooCommerce sites are going to be suffering from as well, is the normalization of property values, attribute values. So, for example, a t-shirt, you can have a t-shirt that has size small, but other sites write it with the capital letter S. Other sites write it with small letter S. Um, some sites write small with a capital letter S, and the rest is lowercase. So normalizing that data through an entire database of thousands of products, that took that one of those clients almost a year to actually clean up their database and to make sure, okay, we now got everything in centimeters. We now got everything in the proper color values because you need to have everything normalized in your database. So first off, a big issue a lot of sites I expect will suffer is data quality within their own internal systems. Second issue I discovered is a single property named varies by. The documentation describes that for product variants, the product group should have a property that specifies along which properties the variants exist. So if there are only variants based on color, you can say product group varies by schema.org product color. Imagine it differentiates between width, height, and depth. Then you can say varies by width, height, and depth. Um, that seems very simple if it weren't for the fact that most CMS systems don't have such information available. So what we ran into with a bunch of developers is, okay, now we got the entire set of product variants, and now we need to compare all those variants against each other to be able to determine how they vary. Because how they vary is generally speaking not stored, not in Shopify, not in WooCommerce, not in Magento. It's information that generally speaking doesn't exist in the current CMS systems out there. So I expect a lot of developers will struggle on how to populate that one single property because it requires them to start comparing all those different variants within a group to be able to extract that information. And those are the two biggest struggles I've been running into myself.
So
you take
in
that
the
one
real,
client, it took us in reality 1.5 years to get everything set up. 80% was already set up in place before Google made its announcement, and the final 20% was done when Google made its announcement. But it still took us like 3 months to be able to finish up that last 20%.
okay. Okay, so Larry was saying this could be a leverage point for endless CMS.
It doesn't necessarily need to be headless. It needs you to be able to add custom properties to products. And those are things you can do in Shopify, you can do in WooCommerce. But you have to do that highly consistently throughout an entire website in the entire database of products. And doing that consistently, that's a bit of a trick for humans because people always make mistakes. So trying to filter out all those mistakes and normalizing all those data properties is a bit of a thing, regardless of the type of CMS it is. Because current CMS systems, even the Atlas ones, don't store that information by default.
Okay, so in the reality, the big problems are human problems, let's say, are really having a clean database, and comparing the properties. So really, it's something that in the reality, it's really up to who is responsible for the CMS, probably who is responsible for the database, or the person then should take care of that.
I feel sorry for those developers that over the coming months and years will receive those tickets to populate those values and go like, yeah, but it took me like 5 minutes to write that markup. Yeah, writing the markup cost you 5 minutes. Being able to dynamically populate it will take you 3 or 4 days, if not more.
Okay. Boy, it will be an opportunity to clean up the database.
It depends on how
Let's
many
see the
products you have.
side. Okay, so I think then it is clear. Okay. Do canonicalize product variant? No, wait. Wait, is there? Okay. What happened if I have a different variant of one URL and different price? So, okay, so you have two different things. So you have,
Mm-hmm.
for example, let's say then you have two Like a black t-shirt, you have exactly the same t-shirt in green, but the price is 30 for one and is 15 for the other one. Does that has an impact? Because, oh, not at all. I just changed the price and it's okay.
Well, the good news is from a markup perspective, that's being resolved quite easily. You have a product group, then you have a property that says has variant, and you add an array of all the products you have as product variants. But each of those products has its own offer.
Okay.
So you can clearly say for each individual product variant, what is its price? Is it a sales price? Is the price, does it end at a certain date or is it out of stock? Although all that type of information still can be provided on a per product variant situation. So the good news is you can still freely add that information. In theory, you should not have to have an offer or an aggregate offer for the product group itself, because the price can be determined based on the offers of all the individual variants. But that
Okay.
should be pretty straightforward.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Now, what happen if I have, I don't know, that's the one that I just read. Okay. So next one. Do canonicalized product variant prevent variants from being indexed and show in a search result?
Oh, that's a good one. There's been a lot of confusion for what seems like forever already about how canonicalization works. Some people seem to believe that if you canonicalize certain URLs, they won't be indexed. That's not correct. Canonicalization is not a directive, it's a hinting system. So if you have a whole bunch of URLs that sort of are the same pages, then you can hint to the search engines, this is probably the one you're looking for. But search engines want to make sure that they got that right. So they still want to crawl those canonicalized URLs. They don't crawl them often, uh, maybe once a year, maybe once every 6 months, but they still crawl those product variant URLs. And even before product group markup existed, um, you could already surface those product variants in the search results, even though they were canonicalized. Because if somebody is looking for a blue t-shirt size small slim fit, and you also have them in green, blue, yellow, and purple, if somebody added that to their query, Google was able to surface those product variants you canonicalized because they were the better fit for the search query. So canonicalized URLs still get indexed. They just get crawled at a much lower crawl rate. That's basically the main thing you see happening in your server logs. Um, in the search results, generally speaking, the canonicalized URL will be shown in the search results. But if the query is specific enough for a given canonicalized URL, that canonicalized URL can still show up in the search results. So no, canonicalization does not prevent your variants from being indexed.
Okay. Perfect. Um, okay. What should one do if a product variant by property Google doesn't support? Varies by property, sorry, it was me reading poorly. Okay, what should one do if a product varies by properties Google doesn't support?
Mm-hmm. If I'm correct, out of the top of my mind, in Merchant Center documentation, there is a attribute, I think, at the top of mind, it's product detail. I got that one right. And that allows you to specify properties Google of the Merchant Center does not support for their variant information and shopping results. Um, even in Merchant Center, you don't get any filters or special snippets if you add that additional information. It somehow does get used in during indexing and their understanding of how a product is put together and how it applies and for which queries it's relevant. At this moment, Google Search does not have anything for that in its documentation. In theory, it could, because schema.org provides something similar in their vocabulary. It's the additional property. Property. That's a funny one in that regard. An additional property allows you to describe custom attributes of products. So, for example, if you have a monitor, um, you could have a property that says voltage between 110 and 240 volts. That's not a property that's supported for product variants, but there is a method of providing such information. I think Merchant Center limits that to 3 or 10, something around those lines of custom attributes you can add to a product. In theory, in schema.org, that's unlimited, um, but at this moment, it's not supported. Main reason for that being Google is now in its first edition of product variant support. And I'd hate to be a Google engineer right now because the amount of variations on the markup they have to deal with right now, and on top of that, all the mistakes people are going to be making with this, I think it's quite good they took a pragmatic approach and first started with this new type of product with just a few properties supported. There is a chance they'll support additional properties in the future, but I think it's too early for that. I think there are too many kinks they need to work out, and there are too many things people still need to get accustomed to. Maybe 2, 3 years from now, if people really start screaming, we need to have a possibility to add that information as well, then they'll expand on that. But that's not something I expect them to expand on over the next year or 2 years. It's going to be baby steps, a lot of baby steps.
Okay, so just to make it clear to me.
Mm-hmm.
So when there is a property, then it's not supported. But let's say then this property, anyway, by introducing it, could help the understanding of the page. Would you add
Mm-hmm.
it anyway? Yes or no? Because like it's not supported, but somehow it could help the understanding. So I'm always very divided on that. So I don't know how to manage that. So should I do it or not? Because by definition it's not supported. So in the reality it would be useless.
It's the type of thing. If would I add it? Yes, I've done it in the past. But not for the search engines. I've done so in the past because I've done some pretty insane analytics tracking for certain e-commerce parties, and then that information can be really nice to inject into your analytics or BigQuery environments. So yes, I've done it in the past. For search, I've never seen it get any results so far, um, simply because it's way too early for that.
Yeah.
The product variance has just been released, and we can start screaming about all the things that are missing. But this is probably the biggest structured data change in maybe even since structured data was announced. There's
Okay.
not one single entity in Google's documentation that's so overly complex as product. So yeah, there's a lot more to come there.
So maybe they will remove it in 1 year. When finally we are able to use it, they will remove it. So okay. Okay. So what should one do if a product group has a subgroup in its GMC feed that aren't on the site?
Okay, complex question.
So
Think
maybe
I
I
know
write
where it's heading.
like, okay, wait, let me pass that.
Uh-huh.
I paste it in the chat so then everybody can see the question.
Um, I think that's sort of based on what I've seen in Google's current documentation, where they created a product group based on the size of the product in that group. Um, Again, going back to the sneaker example, sneakers can exist in different sizes, they can exist in different colors, and they can have different print patterns. So generically speaking, out of the top of my head, we already have 3 different properties that are currently supported by which products can vary. Um, and on a website, we generally speaking have one landing page for the product, and then we have all the variants. That can be a bit more advanced in Merchant Center feeds. In Merchant Center feeds, you don't necessarily group products together. the way you do on your website. So, for example, if you have, keep it at the shoes. Um, for a merchant center, it's quite common to create a product group for a series of shoes of the same size so that you get a shopping result that only lets you click through the color variants because people have already searched for a certain size. So it's easy if you bundle those together under a single group. It pushes up conversion. That's great. Then you have things covered by size in a product group, but that doesn't provide all the product information. And that's one of the things we were discussing in schema.org, I think 2.5 years ago already. In theory, product groups should be able to be nested so that you can say, here's the product group, the generic product. It has variants. Those are different variant groups. One group varies by size, one group varies by color, so you could theoretically split them up. It's something that has been discussed in schema.org. That's the same reason why the has variant property also theoretically accepts a product group. Unfortunately, Google isn't that far yet. I checked not so long ago with Ryan Levering from Google, and yes, they are aware of it, but again, baby steps. They just launched this, so it's too early right now to already start building complex systems where product groups need to inherit the properties of product groups and give and pass them along to those products. It becomes quite easily quite complex. Again, I can imagine that 2-3 years from now we are able to do that if there is enough demand. But on the short term, no, not yet. It's too much,
Okay.
too early.
Okay,
But
I
the
think
standard
that's
is
very
there.
clear. So there was a question in the chat, so it's coming back probably to your analytics. Then you said before, if you use custom variation for something like analytics, might it
Mhm.
have an adverse effect on SEO?
No, that's the wonderful thing about structured data is that it has been designed very flexibly, and most of all the schema.org vocabulary. Schema.org has all kinds of annotations where it says, okay, you have a product, you have the offers property, and then I expect the offer type as a value for the offers property. At the same time, schema.org is not a strict vocabulary, so you can cross fill out just about anything you want. If you say the offer is a peanut, then that's totally accepted. It won't make any sense to the search engine, but that's okay as well. The good news is they'll simply ignore it. So if you want to add things to your structured data because of your internal analytical reasons, you're quite fine to add things to your markup that the search engines don't understand. It won't hurt you; they'll simply ignore it. And that's just about the most wonderful world there is. You can stuff anything in there you want, and if they don't understand it, okay.
Okay. I think that is like a good tip for not just for the analytics, but in general, because that means also if you do a mistake on something that is not too bad, they will just ignore it. So it's still a good news somehow. Maybe you don't want that, but like it seems like good news.
Yeah, a lot of people are focusing on all the alerts and the errors and the warnings they get in Search Console. And of course, I understand why they're worried about those warnings and those errors. Um, but those warnings and errors come with a little bit of context. Sometimes I wrote a story not so long ago and I added some exotic markup in there about products and some videos and some other stuff. And my Search Console account for that website is full of errors and warnings because it says the product information isn't complete, the video information isn't complete. Yeah, I know. I'm just informing you it's on the page. I'm not demanding Google gives me a rich results. The markup hasn't been set up to create rich results, but I just want to give the context to Google of what is included on this page. So do I worry about those errors and warnings? No, because that markup isn't there to generate certain features. And I see a lot of SEO professionals, people at agencies who are having enormous discussions with clients about, yeah, but I got errors and warnings. And what all those professionals should say to their clients is, no worries about that. We got that covered within the context of its purpose. Those errors and warnings are quite fine, but you need to be able to explain that to your client. Errors and warnings are fine. Things Google doesn't understand nowadays, they simply ignore that. It was a different thing 8, 9 years ago. When you had mistakes there, they ignored everything. But nowadays, they simply ignore that one single part they don't understand, but still process everything else.
In alternative, if you have an error and you're not understanding, call Jarno because this is what I did. Okay, next question. So can one use Google structured data? Okay, I think then it's always better than I post the questions because they are a bit complicated. So then everybody can see them in the chat. And especially I'm awake since 6 o'clock, so I start to be tired. Okay. Can one use Google structured data highlighter to tag product variant?
Oh, wow, Google Structured Data Highlighter. Cool. I can't even remember the last time I used that. That's like an eternity ago. Um, that tool still exists, but I'd have to double check to be 100% sure. But out of the top of my mind, I'm 95% sure it does not support product variants. Um, the Google Structured Data Highlighter was a great idea many years ago that a handful of people produced over at Google, and I don't think it's even maintained any longer. It still just exists, but as far as I know, it's not part of Google's ecosystem any longer. It almost seems like a tool that has to be forgotten by them. So no, unfortunately, if you use a structured data highlighter, you're very limited in the options you have available to you, and don't
Okay.
expect it to be updated.
Okay. So that it was a good answer. So I was searching for the tool to post it. I will not do it because it's useless after this explanation. Okay. So I think then you already answered quite a bit of that, but like it's our last question that we have. What are things we can expect in the near future?
Ooh, interesting one. I think those people that keep an eye out for schema.org and especially its GitHub issues might already have an idea where it's going. On the short term, I'm expecting most of all two things to show up in the guidelines, simply because they've just been accepted in schema.org. First off is the GS1 digital link. The GS1 a couple of years ago came with an initiative where you can scan a barcode with your telephone. And that generates, like QR codes, you can generate a URL with that. So that in the store, you can simply take a picture of a product and follow the link you get to a brand webpage of that product. So what does the digital link allow you to do? It brings the digital environment literally into stores. Over time, we're going to be walking into stores, and right now we still have barcodes. I know there are initiatives over at GS1 to replace barcodes or add QR codes in the system of barcodes. So that means over time, in theory, you could walk into any single store, scan a label, a barcode, a QR code, and directly visit the manufacturer's webpage where you can find all the information of the product involved. Um, I'm nearly 50 now. One of the things I am always hating is that I'm in the shop and looking at a product and keeping it away from me because my eyes are going backwards and I can't read the small printing any longer. Wouldn't it be great if you just can scan the barcode, you go to the website, and there you can get it in a readable font size? So that's one of the things that's coming. Um, Google seems to be very interested in that GS1 digital link.
Mm.
Seems a no-brainer because it connects them, because it allows them to connect the manufacturer to given products. Seems like a win. Second thing I'm expecting real soon are credentials. Also something that's been recently added to schema.org. And credentials, you have to think about things like CE credentials within the European Union for electronic products, or FCC credentials for products in the US. But it can also be credentials actually for organizations, ISO standards. So credentials seems to be a thing that the search engines are also very much interested in, although I'm not sure whether that's because they have a use case for it or because European rules are changing and laws. Um, Europe is very busy tightening down the net around e-commerce. Uh, from talks with people from the GS1, I also know that Google of Europe is now busy with a standardization for materials, and so that in markup you can specify if products, the materials contained within the products are recyclable, have been recycled, what percentage of that material is part of the overall product, and so on and so on. So I'm expecting over the next 2-3 years a lot of new things popping up from the EU side of things, and it's becoming very interesting to see how much of that will be picked up in the US. But Google will need to do something with that no matter what. For the longer term, there are still a lot of things in Merchant Center that have not been translated or integrated into the schema.org side of things yet. Some things have been translated but aren't being used by search yet. And that boils down to those baby steps I mentioned earlier. Um, the folks I've spoken over at Google seem to be a bit hesitant to add everything in one go. Um, they sort of boiled the new markup down to what it's needed for right now so that people have time to adapt and get accustomed to it. And things I expect to be added in the future are things like multi-packs and bundles of products information you can already provide in Merchant Center. The markup exists in schema.org, it's just not in Google's documentation yet. More shipping info, taxation info, sales info, also information you can already add via Merchant Center feeds. Uh, Structured data mostly exists for that. Google just hasn't integrated it in its organic systems yet. But those are things I expect over the next couple of years that will be added as well.
So there is a yeah, okay. So we speak a lot, you spoke a lot about the merch center. So probably it's also important to explain the connection, like like why would you do the effort in the merch center and then you would do the effort in the schema markup, and how do I connect the two? For example, through an idea or like
Mm,
this kind of
it,
why would you do both? There is a reason behind why would you do both.
um, well, good question actually. So far there is no clear motivation yet to do it for both. In theory, you could only use either one. Um, my preference would be Merchant Center in that case, simply because it offers you more attributes than markup currently does. Um, at the same time, I do understand why Google moved away from being dependent of feeds. If something needs to be an organic search result, feeds by nature are not organic. They're specifically produced for a certain channel. Um, so if Google needs to be able to collect that information via more organic methods, that seems totally reasonable to me because not every website in the world does make use of Merchant Center feeds. Merchant Center feeds sounds like an easy solution, but it comes with a lot of challenges for a lot of organizations as well. It's not like you install a plugin and it magically works. Same thing as for the markup, you still need to do property value normalization. You still need to make sure that all the information you need for your feeds actually exists in your CMS. So the moment you need to do that for Merchant Center implies you sort of can also do that for your markup. And if Google is interested in having it in the markup as well, I would be like, yeah, well, why not do both? Although my focus in first glance would be Merchant Center as it's more complete.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then there is Simon. Then, first of all, he shared some schema.org issue, and then down he asked, could you explain define term set and define term, and will that be relevant?
Oh, those are exotic types and properties. Do I expect those to become important? Honestly, no. Just because of the reason they're exotic. Um, there are very specific use cases where you use defined term set and defined terms. Same for schema.org thing. There are very specific cases where you might use them, but they've never been documented over at Google. So you shouldn't expect any support for those from a organic search result point of view. Um, on the other hand, we're also living in a wonderful world called the black box AI. AIs get fed with everything there is out there, and AIs are a lot more able to make sense of things than specifically programmed algorithms for which results are able to do. So who knows? Maybe they do have an impact in the world of AIs, um, but for organic search, I don't expect those to become relevant.
So could you
Information for
explain?
Google needs to be highly specific and pre-classified. They're not very interested in all those terms people make up themselves.
Okay, because I don't know what the final term set is, and I don't know what the final term is. Could you explain me what those
Oh,
are?
okay, sorry. Well, in schema.org, for example, you have schema.org thing, and that used to be the go-to
Mhm.
class if you wanted to describe a concept that's not been defined in schema.org. You would say, for example, peanut doesn't exist in schema.org, so you could say schema.org thing, name peanut, and then you would provide a same as URL to a Wikipedia
Yes.
page describing that peanut. Those are pretty generic words. Sure, you find them in a dictionary, but when we're talking about defined terms, a defined term set could be Google's product taxonomy.
Aha,
Um,
okay.
you
Okay.
have this entire taxonomy by Google that's been predefined for you so that you can classify under which categories your products fall, and those
Okay.
coincide with ad groups. That would be considered a defined term set.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I get what it is. Okay. Are there other possible consequences related to AI? Example, effect on SGE, if ever launched, and e-commerce SEO.
I think that's the one of the questions we all like to have an answer to. And to be honest, the difficulty is we've got no data. We're not being fed anything. If you look at Search Console nowadays, sure, we got some snippet information, we got some search appearance information, and we all like to talk about how markup helps the machines understand uh, markup, the web pages. But the problem I can imagine all those data consumers are dealing with is how do you quantify understanding? So if you cannot quantify understanding in clear statistics, it might as well not exist for just about anybody in the business world, because if you cannot quantify something, you cannot prove any return on investment either. So right now, I can imagine a whole lot of things about how markup could influence SGE, but it would all be speculation, pure speculation. We don't have any data to base anything off, and especially in this phase right now where SGE is still highly experimental.
I sell it to the client saying they need help understanding. Just for information. But yes, I get your point. Okay, so we have one last question, and then probably we will see if there are other questions, but we are getting short of time. How can I tell if Google pick up my product variant markup? So wait, I share here the question.
That's a very relevant question right now. Surely I'm not the only one that's experimenting out there with this. And one of the things we're all asking is what's going to be the ROI of this type of markup. Again, I think at this moment it's still too early to tell. But if you actually do start publishing product group markup, you'll almost immediately see the effect, some of the effects in search result and under the merchant listing reports and under the product snippets reports. You can actually see what you should expect is an enormous rise in the amount of products they have found both in the product snippets report and the merchant listing reports. Um, I've done tests myself where I saw the amount of products double within 2 or 3 days that had been found according to Search Console. I've seen other websites. I think it was Brody Clark that did a post about it where he saw something like three or four times the amount of products Google was able to find. So Search Console is able to show us that they actually find that information. But again, how that will pan out and what type of search results we are going to get, or how much traffic that gets, or if there's conversion rate improvement, too early to tell. We need a lot of test cases out there and probably a year worth of data before anybody can say anything about that. So maybe next year somebody can say something about that, hopefully.
But wouldn't you consider, for example, if you test it on a website and then, I mean, and you block it, like you block, then nothing can happen on the website for also on the specific pages where you had the markup for a month, and then you see an improvement, for example, in visibility, then you could say it is my markup, because if nothing else happened, then it's
Mhm.
that.
That's why you always need a pool that's much larger than one. One is still zero in the world of statistics.
Mhm.
Um, I've done case studies in the past where I absolutely was convinced certain markup was having certain effects to repeat that same implementation on other websites and not seeing the needle move at all. So, did it come because of the markup, or was it something else? It can also be an algorithm update. It can be an update to how the search results are presented to people. Um, Again, we have too little information to make any good conclusions. If you look at Search Console, it's still mostly based on information about 10 blue links. Well, if you see the recent screenshots out of the US, 10 blue links is like 30% of the entire page now. 70% of the page has other types of snippets which Search Console doesn't report about. So, how are we going to prove the ROI of this type of markup if we don't get any data?
Yeah, I
Then we're all
absolutely feel
basing
the
that on
pain.
assumptions.
Yeah, I get your point and I feel the pain. Would you say, and then, um, okay, first of all, we still have 3 minutes. So if somebody have a question, is the moment now, because then we lose Jarno, not forever, but at least for the day, will not be anymore available. So I guess, Jarno, if somebody has question, they can like write on LinkedIn, a LinkedIn post or something like this, and ask you the question
Oh,
and
I
you
constantly
answer.
answer questions on LinkedIn. I answer questions on Twitter. I am part of the big. It's called the SEO group in Slack. I'm part of the technical SEO group in Slack. I think those are two Slack groups that are part of the top five biggest SEO Slack groups in the world. So easily to pick me up over there. Just send me a message, ping me. I'm always up for a conversation.
Perfect. Okay. So we know where to catch you. And I count the question I wanted to close. Regarding Roy, what if you add UTMs to the URL in the schema markup? UTM are separate visible in Google Search Console.
Um, would be interesting to test in certain conditions. At the same time, without very specific tests, I would say then you're presuming those UTM parameters are actually used by Google. Um, for example, if you take Google Lens nowadays, where you do the Google Circle thing on your telephone, and you have a picture or your camera is pointing at something, and Google automatically finds that product you took a picture of, and it presents you with a Google Shopping search result where you can directly buy that product. Where did that UTM parameter ever come to play? Um, the overall trend you're seeing with a lot of the big tech companies like Google, like Meta, like LinkedIn, like Twitter is that they all want to keep you stuck within their own environments. They don't want you to leave their environment and visit another website or open up another app. So in the long run, even those UTM parameter tricks will lose a lot of their value simply because those clients never end up on your website. Google is rapidly turning in just another marketplace, and yeah, you don't get that type of statistics of information from Amazon either because the client is doing it all on their website. So if Google is presenting products within their own shopping results, and within not too long you'll simply be paying directly in the Google search results. Um, those parameters won't do anything for you. And then the question becomes, what type of information is Google going to share with this? Because if everything happens within their environment, in theory, they have no information about your website to tell you. Will they tell information about their platform? I hope so, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Thank you so much. It's 1 o'clock. I had a question, but okay, it's gone now. So it will be for the future. And Brenda is saying, excellent discussion. Thank you. And
Thank you
Brenda,
very
I
much.
know Brenda. She is fantastic and she's a very good tech SEO. So yeah, it's great if Brenda saying that, but you know it. Then you're very good. So, okay, thank you so much. It was fantastic to have you here, and I will add the recording today. I don't know if I will do it today because I'm very tired, but I will do it this week for sure in our YouTube channel. Oh, everybody's saying thank you, Jarno. Okay, because you were really
Thank you,
good
everybody.
answering. Yeah, answering all the questions. That was really, really nice of you. And everybody can find the recording here. I will share it on the chat if you want to find it. Okay. Thank you so much, Jarno. It was really
You're very
fantastic.
welcome.
See you
Thank you
soon.
for having me.
Ciao. Ciao, ciao.